Go. Okay. All right,
So,
thank you.
Somebody's left their notes.
very good. Oh,
I'll be over here.
good.
Everybody's happy? Everybody's in a good place? I'm not sure what kind of introduction we got. Commissioner Carlos, oceanographer Alexandra, plastic pollution fighter Dianna. I'm Jon Bowermaster. First, we have a little bit of trivia. I don't know how we'll be able to respond, but how many oceans are there? One. Anybody else have a guess? This is the smartest crowd I've ever been. One ocean. Sometimes if you look in the map, if you look in an atlas, it'll tell you there are 5, but if you spin the globe, it's pretty easy to see that it's all one big ocean, all connected. And obviously the subject of this panel is risks to that one ocean. And I think we can go through a whole list. Overfishing, pollution, rising sea levels, aquaculture, tourist and overdevelopment along the shores, all impacting the seas. I guess we'll start with the commissioner, since you're closest. You grew up here on the ocean, right?
Yes.
What does the ocean say to you or mean to you?
I think that the oceans, and I hope my mic is working. They gave me another one. I think that it's really, if you look at this history of oceans, if you look at the history of this country, Portugal, and you think about that in the 1400s, before Portugal, China, with Admiral Zheng He, had bigger boats. They had more men, and they went around the world. They went around the world until the 1430, where suddenly the Ming dynasty decided that it was too dangerous to go abroad, that the foreign influence would be wrong for China. And after that, China closed itself from that amazing opportunity where they had bigger boats, some better technology, and Portugal and Spain saw an amazing opportunity of actually go to the world, get out of there, and be the center of the world. There's an amazing book from Ian Morris called Why the West Still Rules, where he exactly tells this story. And this is the story of openness, that the shift from a world that was not centered in this western side of the occidental part of Europe became really the center. And the center was because we went around the world, we explored the world when others decided not to. I think this story is very revealing of what we're going through now, where some politicians are saying, be careful, close your doors, close your borders. And people don't remember that each time you did that, you went the wrong way. The economy went down, and the people went down, and everything didn't work. So I think that Portugal, I think, is a big lesson for the world of openness. And for me, oceans is about exactly that, is the openness to the world.
But you grew up here in Lisbon, you grew up on the ocean. How has the ocean in your own backyard changed in your lifetime?
I think in my lifetime, what was interesting, and the city of Lisbon is a paradigm of that, is that when I was young and we would come to Lisbon, we would not get actually very close to the ocean. All the city was actually a little bit further away from the ocean. And that is something that changed totally in the last 20 years, for better, was to get the city closer to the ocean. And that gives me hope, because I think that people today and this generation worries and wants to do things. Probably in these 2 years and a half, the most interesting person I've met is a young boy from the Netherlands called Boyan Slat, who decided at the age of 16 that he wanted to do something about pollution. And he basically created his own company and raised $35 million to clean the oceans.
To take plastic out,
to take plastic out of the oceans.
Yeah.
And I think that this generation is much better equipped than my generation was. And my job is basically to listen to them and try to help them doing that.
And Alexandra, biggest concerns about the ocean today?
Well, I think that one of the biggest concerns I have, and the issue that I've been working on with Oceana, is overfishing. We have exhausted our fish supplies around the world, and in spite of the fact that we know that if we take the pressure off and fish with scientific quotas, those stocks can recover, we still don't do it. One of the biggest opportunities, I think, in the world is to restore the abundance and diversity of our oceans by managing our fisheries better. And it's not the impossible task that it seems to be, because the research that we've done indicates that the vast majority of fisheries is actually done by a little over 24 countries, which means that if we're able to do 3 things in those countries, which is fish according to scientific quotas, expand marine protected areas, and reduce bycatch, we could bring our stocks back. And that's been proven over and over and over again. The benefits of that is that we could feed twice as many people around the world, 1 protein meal a day. We could help to create a more resilient ocean as we look at growing other concerns like plastic, climate change, ocean acidification, sea level rise, and things like that. If we have a robust ecosystem in the ocean, we're going to be a lot more resilient to those issues. So working with Oceana on this in countries around the world, we've seen the impact that these ideas can have at the policy level, and how that plays out in communities with fishermen and moving forward. And of course, there's different challenges in different countries. You know, Brazil has a lot of challenges right now, as we know, and they don't really have fisheries policies, so we have to start from scratch. The Philippines has amazing fisheries policies and laws. We just need to do a better job of implementing them. The United States and Canada are in a different place, but there's a lot of opportunity for improvement as well. So I think that that big concern that I have for the depletion of life in our oceans is actually one of our greatest opportunities to create change, and is actually, we have the research, we have the strategy, we have a game plan, we have funding. Michael Bloomberg has invested in this. Bill Clinton has thrown his weight behind this. There's a lot of people getting involved. So it's actually tremendously exciting as well.
Yeah, I just worry that there are so many pressures right now that fighting them all simultaneously is a big, big battle. Plastic obviously is among, if not, it's hard to rank them, you know, but where do you put, given all your work on plastic pollution, where do you put plastic in the ocean on the scale of bad things?
Right. Well, as Plastic Pollution Coalition, we're a global coalition, so we're over 650 NGOs and businesses around the world who are all looking at the issue of plastic pollution, not only in the ocean, but going way back and looking at it upstream, looking at it on land, looking at it from extraction and design and manufacturing and implementation, and how it's impacting human health before it ever gets into the ocean. I mean, it's much easier to address this problem before it gets into our environment and before it gets into the ocean. And unfortunately, what happens with plastic once it does end up in the ocean is it attracts other pollutants to its surface, all of these other types of pollution that run downstream, down waterways into the sea, are then attracted and accumulate on the surface, such as, you know, pesticides and pharmaceuticals, DDT, different chemicals. And this is really creating these kind of toxic bombs, even on tiny little pieces of microplastic. And those are then ingested by the marine chain. So we see the statistics come out that say things like, at the rate we're going with plastic production, by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by weight. In my personal opinion, although I think cleanup is part of the solution, I really think that we need to look at prevention. It's just like with illness. Do we want to prevent illnesses so that people don't get sick in the first place? Or are we going to make money off of these kind of gimmicks and schemes to try and pick it up at the end? I'm much more interested in prevention. I think it's more cost effective. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about hope, but before we get into hope, because I am a born cynic, I've stumbled into this project recently, which is impacted by all of these different environmental messes. And we're making a big feature documentary about the plight of fishing slaves. Who knew there were fishing slaves? Tens of thousands of men who are captured on boats and forced to work for free for years at a time. And ironically, it goes back to overfishing, because it's costing the fishing companies more to go further to find the fish they need. And one line item they've been able to cut out now is labor. It's a huge problem. It starts in Southeast Asia, but you see these boats working literally around the world. On that note, Commissioner, give me something hopeful about our ocean future.
I think that, the hope I have, and I don't know if my mic is probably not working. I'm going to use this one. We had an amazing conference not long ago in Malta called Our Oceans. And for the first time, all the European countries pledged to put more than 1 billion euros. And 500 million will be from the European Union. So we know we have it. We have pledged it, and we have that money. To actually look into 3 areas that I think are essential for our future. The first is about governance, which goes into overfisheries and to pollution. How we'll create a platform, and we have pledged that we'll create that platform until 2020, a multi-stakeholder platform that will deal with governance. Governance within the countries, within the regions, in between the regions, and in between the regional level and the national and global level. And the second is awareness. I think that what we saw in COP21 in Paris for climate, we have to see the same for the oceans. I think that we are here and we all love the subject, so we are aware of that. But out there in the streets of Lisbon, in the streets of Paris, in the streets of Europe, people are not aware of that, and awareness has to be one of our investments. All you people are aware of the problem, so with that awareness we can solve it. And finally is my job, which is science, and we have been putting more than 200 million euros in research for everything related to new technologies. We are launching a very interesting strategy on microplastics.
Great.
And exactly as you said, the prevention, how is it possible? You know, one of the things we're going to do in the European Commission at the heart of Europe is to say, no more plastic bottles. Where are these plastic bottles? Why don't we drink without the plastic bottles? Why don't we do and we actually lead by example? And so we will do changes at the heart of the European institutions to actually stop with the amount of plastics that we have today. And then how do you create through technology other ideas? Because if people use plastics, it's because there's not yet other substitutions for plastic that would be better for the environment that you could find through technology and research. So I think that after that conference in Malta, where the former Secretary of State of the US, John Kerry, was one of the major people over there, and all the European ministers and all the European leaders, I think that Europe can take the lead, and that's important for all of us.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the awareness issue. Here we are in this, the highest of high-tech environments. I feel like there is an incredible amount of information out there. And if you Google plastic pollution, you could read for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's not for lack of information, but how do we share that with people who are not of the choir? How do we get that beyond the people who are already thinking about these things?
I think it's awareness in a sense of education, right? How do you prepare the generation? Sometimes people ask me, what's the European identity? And I think that there's one European identity that Pascal Lamy, one of the visionaries of Europe, always tells, is that Europeans, we are intolerant to inequality. And that's something that you feel when you travel around. Europeans, we are really intolerant to that. The second is that we have a balance in between collective and individual will. And the third is the environment. This country where we are, Portugal, before we were part of the European Union, we didn't have the same awareness. myself in my generation, but now the generation of my children, they have that awareness. That was through education, where they come to me and say, Daddy, don't do that. Daddy, let's do differently, because they have that from a very young age into the education system. So I think that we are aware, but it's not yet ingrained in most of the educational systems in Europe from a very young age. The oceans. Today, recycling, environment, going from a linear to a circular economy, it's there, but not as it should. And I think that it takes a long time. It takes 10 years.
Generations. Yeah. I read one of the commissioner's speeches, and he quoted your grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, in one of them, in which he said that he reminded us that we're all in the same boat.
Yes, he did say that.
And so, despite your concerns, an example of something that gives you hope, or?
Well, I think that increasingly we share a sense of anxiety about what's happening with our environment. I feel that, not just because of the kinds of coverage that the environment gets, but also the people that I talk to at the different events that I go to who share with me their own personal stories. But I think that one of the really interesting factors or variables in terms of how we address these things in the future is technology. Oceana, in partnership with Google and SkyTruth, created the Global Fishing Watch, which tracks the transponders on the tops of fishing boats and is able to analyze how they move through the water to know whether or not they're likely fishing illegally in marine protected areas or other things, and then they can alert the different nations to what's going on in their territorial waters. And we've also already helped apprehend a lot of illegal fishers and bring them to justice. So I think technology can help us address those kinds of issues where before the ocean was ungoverned. It is no longer ungoverned, and so that's tremendously exciting. And that kind of technology has only just begun. I think we can't imagine today the solutions that we will create tomorrow to address the conundrums that we're facing, and that's exciting. And I think the technology for all sorts of things, whether it's renewable energy or other things, is advancing so quickly that it's creating opportunities to do things differently in a way we hadn't imagined. And for the oceans, that's important. Whether it's SkyTruth or just the idea, and you know this, the oceans start in our backyard. They start where we live and play, and everything we put down our drain or we put in our trash is going to end up in the ocean at some point.
Well, including 1/3 of all the carbon we burn goes into the atmosphere and ultimately ends up in the ocean. It's the equivalent of 84 million Volkswagen bugs a day of carbon ends up in the ocean.
But the thing the other side of that is that the ocean is responsible for every other breath of oxygen that we take. So every other breath you take, you can thank the ocean. And that's how intimately connected we are to the ocean, even if we never see it, we never visit it, we never go to it. The ocean is one of the most important ways that our planet is influenced. And
Dianna, when you go to the ocean, because you live near the ocean, when you go to the ocean, can you look at it with kind of through rose-colored glasses, or do you just see it as this repository for plastic?
I love the ocean, and I grew up on the Pacific Ocean in California. I will always see the ocean with a lot of love in my eyes. I know that the only reason we're able to exist and life exists on planet Earth is due to the existence of the ocean. Sometimes it's hard for me to look at. In Manila, from Bali to Komodo, looking at plastic pollution, there's a lot of it in Greece, in the Mediterranean. I mean, so many places that are precious to me from my life and my childhood have become garbage dumps. And I think that it's really important, again, not to just look at how we clean it up, but think about what we are doing and how much we're producing every day and what we need to do to turn off the faucet of this plastic pollution into the ocean. I think marine protected areas are an amazing idea. And I don't want to see marine protected areas that include an influx of single-use and disposable plastic into them. So different strategies need to be implemented. But you know, as Plastic Pollution Coalition, we have a lot of groups that work on different aspects of this problem. And I wake up every morning and I feel very hopeful because I know that, you know, a little kid saying no to a plastic straw or saying ohi kalamaki in Greece, which means no straw, is just as valuable as someone on the policy or legislative level creating extended producer responsibility, regulations, bans, or laws. So we have to work on every front simultaneously. And as part of why I'm so honored to have been invited to Web Summit and Planet Tech, I feel like we've got this amazing audience of people who really care about this stuff and are launching new companies and startups and trying to take them to scale. In doing that, can't we do it and really look at our production line, our manufacturing, and think about how to do it with a zero waste, cradle-to-cradle model in mind rather than cradle-to-grave, because it's not sustainable. That is not sustainable.
So that's where the awareness comes from now is tech and education.
Absolutely. And to realize that for centuries, economy was linear. And today, if you want to really have a sustainable planet, you have to have it in a circular way. That you cannot have waste. Your waste has to be raw material for something else. And this notion is very difficult to understand because you have generations of economists that were actually trained on a linear way.
Right.
And how do you train them on a circular way? And that's something that is not in our GDP numbers. It's not reflected in the growth numbers that politicians are pushed to have. You have to change a whole education system, not just in the sciences, but also in economy and history and arts, and how you manage all that. And I think I just wanted to go back to Alexander's point on the technology. I think that we are getting into this phase of the internet where these sensors that we will have everywhere, if you can use that information and you can link it to the physical world, I think that we are at the tipping point of something very big. The problem is that today we have kind of a dark matter of information that we don't use. But from the day that you can connect all the dots, I think that we will have solutions that we don't even dare to imagine.
So that leaves us with an optimistic note, is that?
I think so. I mean, I think that we should be optimistic about the future because you see that awareness in this generation, this young generation that was trained to it. I always remember, I mean, one of my idols, apart from Commandant Cousteau, is Sylvia Earle, when she used to say, I think there's a beautiful quote of her that she used to say, no water, no life, no blue, no green. And I think that today people understand that, but we have to keep fighting, and that's what we do every day.
Well.
But I feel optimistic too, I just have to say. And I feel optimistic that the people at Web Summit are going to step up and do something right away. I don't want to wait for the future and imagine the future. I'd like us to take the alternatives and the options that we have right now and scale them up.
On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you.